Alina Habba had never been one to hold back, but what she was about to say live on TV would shake the very foundations of political discourse. It was the kind of moment that had been building for months, perhaps even years. The camera zoomed in on her face as she took a breath, steadying herself before delivering what everyone in the studio knew was coming. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, had just made a public remark about the Trump family, and Alina, Trump's attorney, was about to make him regret it. She started slow, her voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of sharp intensity. "Chuck Schumer," she said, each syllable dripping with disdain, "has no idea what he's talking about. The hypocrisy is staggering." The audience was leaning in, waiting for her next words. She knew the stakes of this conversation. Everyone in that room, and millions watching at home, were waiting for her to tear apart Schumer's argument. She wasn't just representing Trump, but the very idea that political elites like Schumer could attack the family without consequence. Alina's eyes never wavered as she launched into the heart of the matter. Schumer had accused the Trump family of profiting off the White House, of using politics for personal gain, and of being a stain on American politics. To Alina, this was nothing more than a baseless attack meant to undermine not only her client but the family's legacy. "What Schumer fails to recognize," she continued, her voice rising, "is that the Trump family didn't create these systems. They merely found a way to navigate them. If anything, they've been more transparent about it than anyone else in Washington." She let the words linger, giving the viewers time to digest. The studio was quiet. The tension was palpable, as everyone knew this was no typical political back and forth. This was personal, and it was about to get even more heated. Alina's tone shifted as she began to dissect Schumer's comments point by point. She didn't need to shout. Her words cut through the air like a hot knife through butter. For Schumer to claim that the Trump family somehow exploited the system while ignoring the decades of corruption in his own party is laughable. Alina's voice was steady, but there was a fire burning beneath it. "Let's talk about how long Schumer has been in power. Let's talk about how his party has consistently failed the American people, and yet, he has the audacity to lecture the Trumps about privilege." As she spoke, she saw Schumer's face tighten, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was ready to speak, to fight back, but Alina wasn't finished. She could feel the eyes of the nation upon her, and this was her moment to strike. You don't get to come after a family like the Trumps without expecting a fight. And you sure as hell don't get to do it on the backs of lies and false narratives. The words were like a slap to the face, aimed directly at Schumer and everyone who'd bought into the smear campaign against the Trump family. But just as the tension reached its peak, Schumer interrupted, his voice booming through the microphone. "Alina, you're so focused on defending your client that you've completely ignored the real issues at hand." He pointed at the camera, directing his words straight to the millions watching. "The Trumps, they've always been about one thing, themselves. Not the American people, not the public trust. Just themselves." His words echoed across the studio, and for a brief moment, it seemed like he might have gained the upper hand. But Alina wasn't having any of it. She didn't flinch. Instead, she met his challenge head-on. "Let's get one thing straight," she snapped. "The Trumps have done more for this country than you and your party ever will. They built empires from the ground up, and they didn't need to sell out to lobbyists to do it. They didn't need to cozy up to the rich and powerful like you have." Alina's eyes blazed as she leaned forward, her body language exuding confidence. "You want to talk about corruption? Start looking in the mirror, Chuck." The room was silent again, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Schumer's face flushed, and for a moment he was speechless. It was clear he wasn't expecting this level of confrontation. The audience, too, was on edge, waiting to see how this verbal battle would end. But Alina wasn't done yet. "This isn't just about defending a family," she said, her voice low but fierce. "This is about defending the very principles that made this country great. The Trumps may have been controversial, but they've been transparent about who they are and what they stand for." She paused for a beat. "Can you say the same?" The silence in the studio was deafening. Schumer's jaw tightened as he struggled to come up with a response, but Alina had already taken control of the conversation. "I'm not here to defend everything the Trump family has ever done," she admitted, her voice steady but assertive. "But I'll be damned if I'll sit here and let you, or anyone else, smear their name without a fight." She stared at Schumer, not backing down an inch. "And that's exactly what I'm doing now." With that, she stood up, turning toward the camera, her final words ringing out with authority. "You want to keep attacking? Fine. But know this. Every time you do, you're only proving that the real problem isn't the Trump family. It's the people like you who have been in power for far too long." She gave the camera a sharp, final look, and the broadcast cut to black. In that moment, Alina Habba had done what few had managed before her. She had not only defended her client with unmatched conviction, but she had also delivered a powerful message to the American people. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. And no matter what Schumer or anyone else said, Alina was ready to go to battle once again. Alina Habba had always been a figure who spoke her mind, but what she was about to do live on TV was different. There was a raw energy about her, one that simmered beneath the surface for months, perhaps even years. The camera focused on her as she settled into her seat, the tension in the studio palpable. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, had just made a statement about the Trump family that had ignited a firestorm. Alina knew she had to respond, and when she did, the entire nation would be watching. "Chuck Schumer," she began, her voice calm but deliberate. "He just doesn't get it. The hypocrisy coming from him is unbelievable." Her words hung in the air as the studio audience leaned in. She was about to make a statement that would make Schumer regret ever uttering those words. She wasn't just defending her client, Donald Trump. She was defending the Trump family against a narrative that had been built on lies and false accusations. Her eyes locked on the camera as she continued. "Schumer says the Trump family profited off the White House, that they used politics for personal gain. Well, let's talk about that," she said, her voice growing firmer. "You know what? The Trump family didn't create these systems, but they sure as hell found a way to navigate them. And if you think for a second that they've been any more corrupt than the rest of the swamp, you've got another thing coming." She let those words settle, knowing they would sting. Alina wasn't interested in playing politics. She was here for one reason, to defend the Trump family against baseless attacks. She leaned forward, the intensity in her eyes unmistakable. "Schumer and his party want to paint the Trumps as villains, but let's take a real look at the situation. How many decades has Schumer been in power? How much has he really done for the American people?" Alina's voice dropped, almost as if she was sharing a secret. "If anyone in Washington is guilty of using the system for personal gain, it's people like him." For a brief moment, Alina allowed her words to hang in the air. She wasn't just speaking to Schumer anymore. She was speaking directly to the viewers at home. And for him to turn around and point fingers at the Trump family, who have built their empire without relying on lobbyists or special interests, is the height of hypocrisy, she continued, the words flowing with increasing conviction. "Schumer, and people like him, have spent decades building their careers on the backs of the American people, and now they want to act like they have the moral high ground? It's laughable." Just as the tension reached its peak, Schumer, unable to hold back, interrupted. "Alina," he shouted, his voice booming through the microphone, "you're completely ignoring the real issues here. The Trump family may have built an empire, but they've done so at the expense of the American people." Alina didn't flinch. Instead, she met Schumer's challenge head-on. Oh, I'm sorry, Chuck, but you're mistaken. The Trump family didn't build their empire by taking advantage of the American people. They built it by working harder than anyone else in Washington has ever worked. Her voice was unwavering. The Trumps didn't sell out to the highest bidder like you and your party have. They didn't cozy up to the rich and powerful, or give special favors to the highest bidder. They built their wealth the old-fashioned way, through hard work and perseverance. Schumer's face turned red with anger, but Alina wasn't finished. And let's not forget, she said with a smirk, the Trump family didn't need to sell their souls to the swamp to get ahead. They've always been open about who they are and where they come from. Can you say the same, Chuck? The room was dead silent. The audience could feel the weight of her words. Schumer looked like he might respond, but Alina wasn't giving him the chance. She knew this was her moment. It's easy for people like you to sit behind your fancy desks and make baseless accusations, Chuck. But the reality is, the American people see through it. They see the swamp for what it is, and they're tired of the same old games being played. They're tired of the corruption. And they're tired of you. Alina's eyes never wavered as she stared directly at Schumer. She was finished playing defense. This is more than just defending the Trump family. This is about defending the very ideals that made America great in the first place. It's about standing up to the elites who have been running this country for far too long. And I'm not going to sit here and let you tear down that legacy without a fight. For a brief moment, there was a stunned silence in the studio. Schumer seemed to realize that he had lost control of the conversation. His face flushed, and his lips pressed into a thin line as he struggled to come up with a response. Alina, however, wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of a retort. She had said everything that needed to be said. She stood up, her movements confident and deliberate. You want to keep attacking the Trump family? Go ahead. But know this, every time you do, you're proving that the real problem in Washington isn't the Trump family. It's people like you who've been in power for far too long. She gave the camera one last look, her gaze unwavering. And we're done with it. The camera cut to black as Alina's words echoed in the air. It was a powerful moment, one that would resonate long after the broadcast ended. Alina had made her point clear. The Trump family may have been controversial, but they weren't going down without a fight. And as for Schumer, he had just learned the hard way that Alina Habba was not someone to be underestimated. Alina's words hung in the air, the room silent as Chuck Schumer stood there, seething with barely contained rage. He wanted to respond, to claw his way back into the conversation, but he knew he had been outplayed. There was no coming back from the direct, sharp attack Alina had just launched. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. It was as if she had silenced him with the sheer force of her words. She could see it in his eyes. He was a man defeated, his political rhetoric and rehearsed talking points nothing compared to the truth Alina had just laid bare. His reputation was slipping through his fingers, and he knew it. The audience was waiting for him to speak, but the weight of Alina's message had crushed his resolve. His anger was palpable, but it was clear he had lost the battle in the court of public opinion. But Alina wasn't done. This wasn't just about proving a point on live TV. This was about sending a message that resonated beyond the cameras, beyond the walls of the studio. She leaned in, her voice lowering to a more measured tone, but still carrying an undeniable authority. You've spent your entire career standing behind your party's shield, Chuck, she said softly, almost like she was speaking directly to him. But the truth is, the people are tired of the shield. They're tired of the lies and the cover-ups. They want real change, real accountability. And that's why you're losing this fight. The words cut deep, and for a moment Schumer faltered. His chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, and his lips tightened in frustration. He knew she was right, but admitting that in front of the cameras, in front of millions of viewers, it was unthinkable. Instead, he did what he had always done: deflect, accuse, and blame. "Alina," he spat, "you're nothing more than a mouthpiece for a corrupt family who thinks they can do no wrong." But Alina was unfazed. "No, Chuck," she replied, her voice firm and resolute. "The Trump family may not be perfect, but they've never claimed to be. What they've done is exactly what the American people expect. They've built something from nothing. They've fought against the system, not for it. And that's why the people love them. That's why they've always had the support of the people, despite everything you've thrown at them." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Schumer seemed to lose his footing. The audience could see it. The man who had once commanded the Senate floor, reduced to stammering and defending an indefensible position. Alina had won the battle of words, and now it was time for the final blow. She turned away from Schumer, facing the camera with a calm but intense demeanor. "The fight isn't just about one family," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her convictions. "It's about every American who feels like they've been left behind by the establishment. It's about every voter who's been told they're not enough, that their voice doesn't matter. But the truth is, the American people matter. They always have, and they always will." With that, she took a deep breath, letting the silence linger just a little longer. She knew she had struck a nerve. Schumer was rattled. His allies in the studio were no longer so certain of their position, and the audience, both in the studio and at home, was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, but Alina wasn't going to let it hang for too long. She had to finish this. She had to deliver the final statement that would seal Schumer's defeat and her victory. "We're done with the lies," Alina said, her voice ringing out, clear and unwavering. "We're done with the media spin and the attacks. We're done with the political theater. The people deserve better, and they will have better." She paused, locking eyes with Schumer. "You can keep trying to tear down the Trump family, but every time you do, you only strengthen their resolve. You only make their supporters more determined to fight for them, and for everything they stand for." Alina gave a small, confident nod before looking back at the camera. "And that, Chuck, is why you'll never win this fight. Not against them. Not against the truth." With that, she stood tall, a sense of finality in her posture. Schumer, his face twisted with frustration, opened his mouth again, but no words came out. The silence stretched for a moment longer, and then the producer's voice came through the earpiece, signaling the end of the segment. The camera cut to black, the studio lights dimming as the broadcast ended. The moment Alina left the stage, her heart was racing, but there was no doubt in her mind. She had just turned the tide. The viewers knew it. Schumer knew it. And most importantly, Alina knew it. She had taken on one of the most powerful figures in Washington, and she had come out victorious. The aftermath of the broadcast was immediate. Social media exploded with reaction, both supportive and critical. Alina had become a lightning rod for debate, but that was exactly what she had wanted. She was no longer just defending the Trump family. She was fighting for something bigger, something far more personal to every viewer watching. And as the media cycle turned, one thing became clear. Alina Habba had made her mark. The story didn't end with this broadcast, not by a long shot. It was only the beginning. The battle for truth, for transparency, and for the future of American politics was far from over. And Alina, with all the resolve she had shown in that moment, would continue to fight. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. And as for Schumer, his time in the spotlight was beginning to fade. The cracks in his narrative were already beginning to show, and it was clear that Alina had set the stage for something much bigger. The Trump family was stronger than ever, and now so was Alina. The battle lines were drawn, and the fight had just begun.